Thank you, sir. Thank you for calling me over and giving me a chance to present something that is very close to my heart, and that's about people. But I must apologize because listening to Mike, I've practically forgotten what I was here for. It was so enrapturing that I have absolutely a very keen desire to step out immediately and go and look up the internet to see what is there and understand what it all means. But which also made me think that, it's very good to have technology, very, very good to have the tools. It's wonderful to see what's happening, people thinking, but what's more important is also to focus on what Mike said was the do tank. Because I think it's the do tank which has what I'm going to talk about now, the human capital. So before I get on to the presentation, I really want to introduce the organization that I come from. It's called Smarthead Strategy Solutions. We are the specialists in the Indian corporate sector. We worked across the industry segments and across business verticals. We focus on strategy, operations practice, people management, finance and taxation, IT, legal, many such aspects. And I'm joined here today by my colleague who is in the audience. And so after this presentation, if you have any questions, both of us can jointly answer those. My colleague is Mr. Nanda. He's also a partner in the organization. So our clients actually have been pan-industry, and we've got a very, very deep understanding now and exposure to how the Indian corporates are functioning, what are the problems that are dogging the Indian industry, and what is it that is required by way of a simple solution. You probably look at our logo and it says Saral Samadhan. Most of our partners and myself, we come from the industry as operating managers. We've had a lot of consulting services that we've bought and worked upon, and have been victims of consulting. So we got great reports, we got great ideas, but we had no way to know how to implement them. And also, when we started reading those reports, we figured out that it is something that we could do. We just needed a consultant to tell us how to do it. So though we are consultants, we're not in that league, and that's because we walk the mile with all our clients. When I got this topic about human capital cost to investment, I thought, for a lot of people in the audience, things would be quite clear, but nevertheless, to mention some of the definitions. One of it was cost. As Wikipedia reads it, amount spent to produce gets something and hence not available for use anymore. So that's something which you can see parting. It's like your dollars or your rupee flying out of your hand. On the other hand, the investment definition is very different. It says putting money into an asset with expectation of appreciation. Now, when I look further down, drill down to the definition of asset, it says asset is something that puts money back in your pockets. That's a beautiful cyclical definition. In fact, the IBM chief was quoted saying, when IBM was still a very large machine maker, that my assets walk in at 9 in the morning, all my assets walk in at 9 in the morning and leave at 5:30 in the evening. So with that, I thought I would also like to expand on the definition of human capital. Again, I'd like to read it because it's something which has a lot of jargon. But once read, there's an undernote to this slide which will explain what it really means. So human capital is a stock of competencies, knowledge, social and personality attributes, including creativity, embodied in the ability to perform labor so as to produce economic value. The key word is economic value. It's the abilities and skills of any individual, especially those acquired through investment in education, training, that enhance potential to income earning, according to Collins English Dictionary. Now, these are two definitions, sound very simple to understand. Even simpler if you look at that little undernote there, which says that when we look at what is building human capital, when we look at a person who goes to a university versus a person who's gone to school, we see that the difference of human capital, which means his ability, his delivery, his knowledge, attribute, they practically go up by 3 times, rather 2.73 times. That's the statistic that I pulled out of a website. Contrary to what a lot of business believes, that one of the most important things in business is money, funds, capital, putting things in place, the land, the asset. What was found out as the 4th most ranking important aspect that impacts business results is human capital. It was only 4th to regulatory, operational and strategic aspects, but it was still ahead of financial and reputation, supply chain and even information technology. I apologize for that, because most of all the rest are driven by human capital. And that is the ability of somebody to work intelligently, use knowledge, use domain, and get the results. So, just before when we broke for lunch, and the fact that we've worked with a lot of companies in this space, we've come to understand that there is, everybody has a lot of problems, but there are about 90% problems which seem to be common problems across not just the textile and the garment industry, but across all the industry. It is that 10% which is perhaps very specific. And these people management problems are not some things that are very easily explainable or solved, or something which have a straight answer. And the reason why is because, much as we know how to make machines, we know how to make 3D printers, we know how to do a lot of things with our mind, nobody knows how to make us except, the great God Almighty. And that's why we don't understand the complexity of what's really gone in. Might you think that there would be a chance when there could be a 3D imprint of human? Yes, there is clothing, but is it going to be same as the original in terms of intellect?
I don't think so, but there is work being done for bioengineered organs. Like there's work being done for creating a liver or a kidney using 3D printing, but I don't think it's going to create the mind.
Yes, so I think what's differentiating us is really what rests above our shoulders. So when we, though I hate addressing these things as problems, but when you looked at what was, worrying us, in this sector, yes, and others also, difficulty in finding the right trained people, solving the retention mystery, wages, more wages, how much do we pay, what do we pay, how do we pay it, how often do we pay it. Educated but unemployable people. There are lots of people out there, but there's not enough to bring in to kickstart them from day one into doing the jobs. And yes, there's government policies in this country and a labyrinth of labor laws, which take you through the maze of actually creating a very viable environment for the people. Neither the people understand it, nor do a lot of us who are trying to read day after day understand what it really means, or where are we going to benefit and where are we going to lose if things don't go as per the law. But why do we think that, I'll just go back and spend a second so that you can mull over this. The problems of finding the right trained people, solving the retention mystery, wages, the 4 at the top, educated but unemployable. And why is it that this is a problem? I might have some very hard-hitting statements here. I might say that, these problems are what we've created. We as people who own business, we as people who run businesses, we as people who advise businesses, and generally all of us. So, and that's because, when we look at talent and we say that we want somebody to come and start working and we want the right fit for the job, we are expecting that somebody walks in and, hits the button and gets everything rolling on day one. Not many of us from our studies of the industry have really looked at how can I get a human being because he's intelligent, because he has the right values, because he has got something that will in him that will make me successful, my business successful, and then put him on board, train him, take him forward. So the moment I look at the second piece, it looks like a mountain of activity, and I want to get started immediately, want to get my results coming, want to pay my bankers, and ensure that I have somebody who starts. But I think if we do not include this in the planning process, then we are always going to live with these problems. Second is, when we bring in somebody, we bring him and we hire him for the capability, and we say that here's a guy, he knows how to run the machines, he knows the textile technology, he knows what's dyeing, what's extrusion, and maybe every other thing that he needs to know. But when you get him, you expect him to deliver very mechanistically. He is supposed to start from point A, move to point B, and there's only one route to go from point A to point B. And that's where everybody starts, It's what I call do as is told function. So, irrespective of whether you're joining in finance, in HR, or in manufacturing, when you join, there's a set of people who come and tell you that, this is the way we've done things, this is our policy, this is what we follow, and this is how we are going to do things from tomorrow onwards, and you better fall in line. And the other most important thing that people get to listen, and I'm not trying to discourage the young population here because there's quite a room full of very, very eager and fresh faces. But yes, we as seniors need to change the way we think, because this generation is not, I think we're like 5 generations away from the current generation. It's not 1 generation gap. And very often we hear our seniors say that, when I can work 7 days a week, why can't you? When I can put in 20 hours a day, why can't you? And that is not exactly how we should be looking at, down the road, 70% of the population, which is going to fall in a generation gap, which is at least 2 to 3 generations away. So we really need to look at, how we need to be like them instead of them being like us. And that really brings about the sensitivity. And also to look at how we can focus on ourselves internally, to get the right talent, to train them, to look at career management, to look at competency building, because in spite and despite 7 days a week, or 20 hours a day, you just might not get the output because the two are not, one is east and the other is west, and the twain are not meeting. So it's very important also for organizations and in this space, because the textile and the garment industry is one of the oldest sectors. We just heard in the previous session that it employs, second to the agricultural sector, the maximum number of people. And I just heard the number of about 12 million people being employed in this sector, but the estimated sources, which means there are a lot of supply chains which feed into the sector, the number runs to about 30 million. Now, if there's a 30 million large population set that is contributing to the success of this sector, I'm sure it has enough geniuses. I'm sure it has enough talent. I'm sure it has a lot of things it can do to bring about a complete change. However, I might not have very many people here, especially the owners of the business, who can stand and say that this sector has made that impact on the way talent, on the way human capital is observed and looked at. Now, if we were to really look at 30 million people, I think the trend should not have been set by IT or telecom. The trends should have been set by this sector. And, maybe the reason being that, and why we couldn't do it is because, we did not give enough room to our people to bring about that smart thinking approach to work. Because we did not look at measuring their capability. We did not have a tool. All we had was a salary which was given out as a payment and not as a reward. Now, if I look at John Ingham, he is an HR specialist and writes a lot about human capital. If you look at the triangle, I think where we all in this country, and even in the inaugural session, I was heard I heard somebody saying that, we are not aggressive enough. And if you look at this triangle, I absolutely feel that we are not aggressive enough in understanding who we are, what is the strength that lies within, because we're focusing purely on what is the value for money triangle at the bottom, which is just about administering HR, ensuring that there's process efficiency to a degree, ensuring that things are done on time, that people swipe their cards when they come in, and so on. But if you go to a level above, the middle triangle, it says adding value. Some of us have got there, and I see the change happening now. But when you look at the topmost triangle, it is about creating value. It is not about adding value. It is about doing things which build a capability for the future. I think what Mike just talked about was creating, and the future is here. Every 1 second away is the future. So I think creating capability for the future and will drive the business. And our understanding of human capital needs to be very detailed. We need to know what and how to measure human capital and to see how we can scale it up. I just wanted to actually bring in a case of a company without naming it. And we were working with them. We talked about, from our research with them, a situation, and it was a company which was employing a lot of young people. And this is in the textile space, very large organization. We talked about 6 days a week, moving to 5 days a week. And why we said that was, when we looked at the shop floor, there was, it was just absolutely not organized well. There was somebody who's the whole lot was preparing the machines for a purple colored dress, and what walks in was a green colored dress, so they had to change all their thread, and that took them about 40 minutes. Then the next step was to put the labels. There were no labels, so there was another waiting time, and this is like about a few hundred workers waiting for labels, and then something else and something else. So we said if we come out of all of that, we can actually save a day. And in addition, we said that this whole 6-day syndrome is leading to a camaraderie to the benefit of the workers. So if there was one worker who didn't show up, and sometimes by design, the other would step in and take an overtime for that. So it's like you scratch my back, I scratch yours. And then, of course, this industry employed a lot of women. And with 6 days a week, and by the time they would reach home, it used to be pretty much like 9 in the night. So it was 8 in the morning to 9 in the night kind of a shift for them. And there was practically 100% of attrition in the women workforce the day they got married. So, and they were the best, most efficient, and easy to train. Kudos to all the women. And I think, but the downside is that we did not look at this talent going out of our fingers. When we suggested this to the owners, we were considered as blasphemous. It was not accepted, irrespective of all the math, analytics, everything behind it. It was like, no, it's not happened in this industry. It doesn't happen here. So we are not going to do this. And if we do this, it's going to really set a lot of things. Things are going to fall apart in the other things that we do. So that's how the reaction was. However, I think what needs to look at is some comparison between the old and the new. So there's in the old economy, let's say, this was more like the 70s and the 80s, there was a reasonable supply of labor, people who would come and work with their hands and go back. We see that there's a short supply now and until 2020 of skilled people who have some kind of a vocational skill or have acquired a skill by learning on the job. If you go to a place called Samrala Chowk, it's on the outskirts of Ludhiana. Ludhiana has a very big manufacturing, garment manufacturing units. You'd see that there are buses parked around that street and the circle, and on the buses there are stickers printed which say 235 rupees a day, 280 rupees a day, and that's how they're herding your labor, your trained workforce. And this workforce looks not at your bus to mount, but where the difference is like 10 rupees, and bounce that bus and, there's your talent flying away. So this is exactly what's going to happen for a little while until 2020, where we see that, yes, through the measures that the government is taking and, organizations like Ogtc are putting in by, creating train-the-trainer programs, we might have a somewhat of a surplus. The other change is that employers used to be the bargainers. They used to choose the employees. I mean, look at the workman status that I talked about. The workman's choosing where he wants to go. And employees are very smart. Now they do a search. They're fishing for what they want to really go for and ignore, irrespective of, other aspects that you might want to flaunt. Third aspect is, employers used to determine how and the work will be performed and when will it be performed. We are living in with a generation who is using their smartphones, using a lot of technology, I'm not talking about city, I'm talking about even rural and sub-rural areas. It was a great task for one of our clients who is based close to Bhopal to get people to come out of even tribal areas and work for them, because they were looking at, what are the options they have. And that's because the emphasis is not just on getting a wage and employment, but it's also on learning and experience. And employees are day after day looking at how they can actually add value to their own human capital. So what really needs to be done is change. And I think Mike talked about change, and I think through the sessions also we've looked at change, what we need to do, how we need to do things different. We need to change, and we need to not think human capital as cost, because cost is very transactional. You want a bang for the buck. You buy something, you want to make sure you use it to the fullest, and when it's done, the transaction is over and you want to push that away. Sometimes when you look at cost, you don't know what the worth is. And you want to also, let's say, implement ERP in your organization, and you get the guy who's working in the company next door in the same sector and come in and say that you've worked on ERP implementation, why don't you come and work for us? But why aren't you looking at somebody from, let's say, a sector which is completely different? Because he might bring in a lot of skills. So, and we really don't know how to look at the worth of human capital. It also has a very negative connotation. Cost is always, when we even go out shopping, for us, cost has a negative connotation. And we have to remove our own filters of looking at, aspects only like productivity and control and employment in this new world. Because there are many other aspects that are going to govern your success. And most importantly, I think what's very, very essential to know is what got you here might not get you there. And how do we go about enhancing the human capital is something that becomes very essential, and it's an outside-in process. So you cannot run training programs just because you think it's good to have 4 days of training per employee per month or some other statistic that you need to meet. It is what does the world want? What do your customers want? What do people out there want? So if they want things to be shipped before they are manufactured, if they want things sitting on their doorstep 24 hours from when they'd ordered, then I think we really need to tailor-make everything that we do ever so often. And we also need to look at the value systems that we are creating. So if you're creating a learned economy, then that would perpetuate. We'll get more and more people who would understand what their leaders did to help them invest in human capital and do the same to their people, their reportees, the people who work for them. It's also important to build that attitude and skill and knowledge within the workforce by not buying. You can't every time go and step out and say, I want to hire somebody, so I'll pay the money and get him out from some other organization. Build it from within. And it also comes from empowering people. Sometimes you might not have the talent to, example, implementing ERP. But when you get the person in, you have to empower the person to give you the right inputs, to take some decisions, so that he feels enabled, he feels that, at every step he needs to improve himself, build his own human capital, and thereby contribute to the company he's working for. Most of all, I think, an appetite to learn and adapt. Because if we do not know how to adapt, we'll be left where we started. There's just a little statistic from a company which is not named. It says investment in human capital gives you greater returns. Now, this is, if you look at the quartiles, the bottom quartile, second, third, fourth, are the quartiles of investment in training. The top quartile is companies which have invested the maximum in training. And if you go down on every parameter, let's look at gross profit, where companies who are in the bottom quartile of training investment, it comes to 22.8. Whereas if you go to the top quartile, it comes to 40.4. Return on assets, 4.2 to 5.5. Market capitalization per employee, 263.2 to 668.2. Now, these figures are by McBassey and Company, and they are human and HR analytics in the US. Now, what is it that we really need to do? We really need to understand the links of your vision, your strategy, and how it links to recruitment, training, career management, performance, rewards, ethics and compliance. And ethics and compliance is, I'm referring to ethics not as things which come under Anti-Bribery Act or the FCPA or something of that sort. It is about doing what you say and doing it cleanly. And what will facilitate that process is an organization structure, systems and processes to support it. And that's when we'll see that there would be enough reason for organizations to, and enough pathways that organizations can find to build in the human capital across every activity of people development, right from recruitment to retailing. So this is just the same things that I said. It has to be coupled to the business strategy. It has to have, the organization structure has to be designed in a way that it is helping the human capital to build up, recruit innovatively, and reward for the end and the means to the end. Very often we say, yes, we made a profit of X million rupees, but we have not looked at the entire chain of how we went about making that profit. So I think it's very important, and that's where fair play and compliance come in, which would definitely look at, improve your employer branding. And thus, you get money back into your pocket, which is what an asset is. So do we have the conditions to start? It will, provided you have a long and short-term business strategy with an execution plan, you have clear actions to achieve these goals, you are being prepared internally at the top level to invest in training, to be prepared to, if necessary, to reorganize processes, most importantly the thought process, to be prepared to reward people, not by way of a wage, but by autonomy, by their participation, by their promotions, and by incentives. In this industry, I haven't seen any organization that I have so far worked with, and that's quite a few, which has an incentive policy. So I think that is going to be one big step. And if all of this does happen, then I think there is a fair reason to believe that your human capital is going to be your investment, which is going to bring money back into your pocket. And with that, I would like to take you to a section of, especially the owners of businesses and the senior managers are sitting here, to a section on our website which is called Diagnostics. Now, if you click on the Diagnostics section and you want to know where you are with reference to your people, your business plan, your strategy, your preparedness for the future, then all you need to do is click there. It's a very easy tool. It takes 15 minutes for you to fill up, and you will have a report, a preliminary report in front of you, and you will know where you are. And the best is if you have not just yourself, but at least few people from the top management who would also fill this out, because then you'd also know whether you're on the same page. And very often we found that there's a set of people which moves in one direction, the management is in something else, and the promoters are in some other direction. So I urge you to go look that up and do it for yourself to see where you are in the section on people and human capital. And I think that is going to give you an idea, even from a perspective of your workforce and your own preparedness for the future. So before we leave, I just want you to take away these few questions. Are we aware of the changes that are happening around us? We're not going to be discussing the answers. There's something that is just introspection that you have to do. Can we think of what impact these changes could have on business, careers, jobs, lives? Is it a continuous process? Is it one-time activity? Should I do some kind of ideation exercise, an organizational development initiative, and then forget about it and do the next one 10 years down the line? For you to decide. How adaptable are we to change? Can we look around and find, I think this is very important, if you look around and find successful people in companies who've adapted to change, you'll find a lot of your answers. And what can we do about it beginning tomorrow? So what we really need to look at are some learnings from the words of Mr. Pramod Batra, who's a life skill guru. He's about 80 plus. And but one few takeaways that I've had from him, remember that a successful marriage depends on two things. One, finding the right person, and second, being the right person. The other thing he said was your altitude in life is determined by your attitude in life. How high you will fly and how high you will make everybody fly with you is completely dependent on your attitude. And if you want to plan for a year, farm corn. If you want to plan for years, plant trees. If you want to plan for decades, nurture men. And I think these are very wise words. If you mull over them, we'll find that, simple things will give you simple solutions. And you'll find your answers, and we'll move forward in the direction that the industry should, with 30 million people, I think, has the potential to change the entire economic situation of the country. As for me, I did not introduce myself, but I was very kindly introduced by Sir here. I've spent about 22 years in the corporate sector. I've worked in companies like Citicorp, Schlumberger, Hughes, which is why I said that we were victims of a lot of consulting, which comes from, absolutely the blue chip consulting organizations. And so I decided that, from being on the other side of the table, I should move and become a consultant myself and break this myth that consultants would just leave you with reports. So we work with a lot of hands-on knowledge of business management, implemented to people management, and we can be contacted at this website. If you have any questions, I think we'll be having a question and answer session. And thank you very much. And I'm glad I don't see so many people dozing as I was expecting at a post-lunch session. So thanks a lot. Thank you very much.